Welcome back, guys. My next guest, she interned in college for the Late Show, David Letterman. She played the cello growing up, and her orchestra toured in Japan. She indeed is left-handed, which will come into play here in a bit. She has 3 Emmys, and we're going to talk deep into this. Her family loves The Simpsons. Her daughter is named Maggie. Her dog is named Homer, and she named her Blue Car Marge. CEO of Left Hand Agency, Lauren Ridgley. Good to see you.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Course. And all right, so I told you offline, I'm a massive Simpsons fan. It's kind of funny. My son Jake and other son Wes, they're like infatuated with The Simpsons, and my wife is just like not having it. And I'm like, that The Simpsons were like a pivotal part of my entire life, and the fact that it's still ongoing. But why the infatuation on your end?
Matt Groening, who created The Simpsons, is actually from Portland, and so when it came out many many years ago, it's obviously been around for a really long time. We definitely started watching it as a family, even though some of the jokes were a little bit more above a child's head, but we loved watching it, and we actually identified more with that family, with their chaos and all of that kind of stuff, than with the Cosby Show, which we were watching at the time. You just kind of back in the day, you had that appointment TV. And so that became our new appointment TV as a family. And my husband actually wasn't allowed to watch it as a kid.
Wow.
And
Okay.
so when he was finally allowed to watch, he caught up on all of it. And I think that was also played into the fact that he loves it because it was sort of forbidden. Um, but there's a lot of Easter eggs inside of The Simpsons that are
Yeah.
related to Portland proper, like Reverend Lovejoy. Lovejoy is a street here. So there's lots of things that we, look for and think about when we see it. And I just love them. It's great. I don't know if you play Fortnite, but they just had a Simpsons
Nice.
thing on Fortnite, and that was a big thing in our family too. So
I
my
saw
husband
that.
and daughter
Well,
play
that's
that.
actually how my son Jake busted himself because he doesn't play Fortnite often. So he gets like an hour and a half on a Saturday and that's it. And he busted himself because he wasn't supposed to watch The Simpsons. And then he told my wife, he's like, Mom, The Simpsons are on, Fortnite. And she's like, How do you know what The Simpsons are? I was like, Bro, you messed
Oops.
up that.
Yeah.
Um, but it is kind of interesting, right? Especially, there's little to what your point was. There's little Easter eggs in my career on why I ended up in advertising. Those who have been on the podcast have heard me talk about it. You probably share the same sentiment, but Absolute vodka ads back in the day. Remember when they would do? So
Yeah.
that's one, and then the other one is The Simpsons, just because how creative everything was and just how off, just kind of bizarre, but really in a cool way, were the
Yeah.
2 reasons, honestly, if I go back and say, like, "How'd you end up in advertising?" Those are the 2 moments. So I love that your
Yeah,
love.
that's funny to talk about because even when we were watching, I was just watching the Fortnite game when they were playing, and they obviously didn't call it Duff Beer because it's a kids game, but
Mhm.
they had the like the identity of Duff Beer. It was relabeled, and it was like that whole idea of like your identity as a brand is not just tied to the actual words, but like the visual design. And I was like, that's
Mhm.
Duff Beer. I can spot that across the
Yep.
room, even if it doesn't say beer on it. I know what they mean, and adults know what they mean. So yeah.
Now, do you buy into the conspiracy theories that The Simpsons basically is the underlying of the US government and everything that we do? Because I'm like,
No, I have to
everything's
go research that.
Oh,
That
you don't know
sounds
about this?
No, I don't know that one.
I think you can Google it. I think they've been right of over like 180 different things. Like,
Oh.
Donald Trump came in The Simpsons, came down the escalator. Yes, that happened.
Oh,
There's a thing about COVID, not COVID exactly, but like a bio
yeah.
thing was really, and it's wild
Well,
because
I'm gonna have to I could go down a rabbit hole of that. I'll probably
yeah,
spend the rest of the day doing that now.
yeah. Oh, you have no idea. There's Instagram pages. I thought for sure, yeah, it'll give you a whole nother like, because I found myself going back and watching every one of those episodes. I was like, oh, dang.
Oh, yeah, that's fascinating too,
Yeah,
how he's, like, predicting the future. That's awesome.
yeah.
I'll have to
So
check that out.
yeah, good stuff. So let's walk through your journey. So you and I were kind
Yeah.
of introduced through a former guest that's been on the podcast, and she was like, "You have to have my friend Lauren on the podcast," and then we have to give a shout out to Ben Billups.
Yeah.
So Ben, for our listeners, founder of Billups Agency, based in Portland as well. But what's the connection there? Him and I were WhatsApping last night. He's in
That's so
Istanbul.
crazy. Yeah, he and I went to grade school together. It's such a like, he lived just up the street from me, and I didn't work in advertising the first part of my career, and he was my sister's grade, and when I started working in more media buying and working in out of home and everything, she was like, I don't know if you know this, but like Ben Billups is doing a thing with that. And I was like, oh my gosh. And he and I ended up connecting for coffee. And he was really amazing to give me just some time and advice when I was starting the agency on some tips on what to do and what not to do that has proven to be really, really valuable. Such a smart person. Just a ton of respect for Ben and as well as what he's built in this industry as a name for himself. It's amazing, and the work that they do, and they're global now. So it's incredible to see someone do such amazing things in the world. So
Yeah,
yeah,
he quote said, "I grew up with in the exact same area. Her older sister was in all my classes. She's great. I'm so happy to see her growth." So
but
I love
oh,
that
that's
connection.
wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of take our listeners back a bit before we get to your where you are in your career now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, growing up, I was always somewhat artistic and a musician. I was never that athlete, in the family, and I'm still not. And I always knew I kind of to want to work in some sort of creative arts in some fashion. And I actually was the photo editor in my high school yearbook, and was really into like the journalism side of things. I wrote for the school newspaper. I was also in drama, so I was definitely on more of the creative side of things. And I decided I wanted to be a journalist. And so I went to school for journalism. That's where I wound up going to University of Oregon for journalism. And I thought that I was going to spend my career being a journalist. And then right out of school, actually got a job at a news station in Portland, Coin TV. And I was not doing journalism. I was actually doing the marketing for journalists, which I actually found to be a better fit for myself because I still got to be adjacent to, news, which I really love, but I was really doing more of the marketing side of things, which was more creative. So I really loved it, and that's where I ended up getting my Emmys. Was working in the news industry for many, many years. I traveled the country. I lived in Seattle and Denver, and then I wound up my TV career in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, working for Hearst Television. And at that point, I was director level, and got to be on some cool boards and really get to plug into more network side stuff with like ABC Network, which is our affiliate, and I got to see kind of a bigger picture world. And at that point in time, started doing media buying for the station as the marketing director. And then eventually I hired an agency to help me with that. And I ended up leaving television really because I could kind of see number one, streaming was coming in and really disrupting the industry. And I didn't see it getting much better. And I was like, also, I want to have a family and this job is very demanding. And I think I need to just change what's going on. So I left and I really didn't know what I was going to do next. And there's sort of a thing that happens when you have worked outside of agency life is that you can't in your I think I was 35 at that point. You can't just switch gears and go get a good paying job at an agency. You have to start at the bottom. And I was like, not doing it. So I just started freelancing, and I started freelancing for other agencies and as well as brands, and did that for about 5 years. And then was like, I think I'm ready to like really give this a go and go all in. So I sort of ceased all of the other work that I was doing and was like, I'm going to hang up my shingle officially as Left Hand Agency and get that going. And right away, I had a friend who hired me to do her media buying. And then CBS Paramount actually hired us to do their media buying for all of their TV stations, which was kind of our big whale client that got us going. And super grateful for them. We worked for them for 3 years. It was tremendous. We got to work with marketing directors at TV stations, which was my prior job. So part of it was really amazing to get to work with all my industry peers, but doing my new thing, and helping teach them about this side of it. Because when you get promoted up to be a marketing director in television, no one explains to you the fundamentals of how to manage a brand. You've just made really beautiful promos in the past and really done great commercial work, but no one's like, here's the fundamentals of reach and frequency and how that all works. So being able to work with my peers and explain that to them was really fun. And then we kind of moved away. I think what was it, 2022, the writer's strike, director strike, actor strike, everything happened. And that was really bad for both the TV industry, but also for vendors that supported that industry. So we saw really quickly, like, we've got to pivot who we support so that we're not so beholden to one vertical, and particularly one that is so vulnerable, not only from that, but from streaming and everything changing that industry. So we started working with retail media brands, or retail brands, doing retail media, and helping them grow in store. And at that point in time, retail media networks were kind of the new shiny object. And we were really excited too, leaning into those, and all the data segments available programmatically were amazing. But then I kind of quickly saw like this isn't scalable. These are not scalable things, and so this is not a good standalone option to grow a brand, and I'm a big believer in broad reach and frequency and all of the things that kinda come together to grow a brand, and so we really quickly developed a unique point of view about how to develop a brand that is sort of outside of that framework and taking people step back from the shiny object and look at the big picture and what do we need to do to grow your brand both short and long term. And there's a ton of science behind it. It's not like I invented this concept, but it's sort of not been talked about because performance marketing came along and everyone saw closed loop attribution and got really excited, and they kind of forgot to mind the big picture. And so we're at this really great inflection point where we can help brands come back to the basics, but also incorporate those layers of retail media that can make things efficient and deliver on those short term KPIs, but grow them long term. And we're having tremendous success with the brands that we work with and being able to prove it out with our partners, with our retail measurement partners as well, to show them like this is what happens when you layer on out of home. This is what happens when you layer on things like broadcast and cable, and being able to show some of the things that got abandoned in the sort of push towards performance are actually really important and played a big part. So,
Well, and it's really difficult, right? I talk about this all the time. Sometimes the shiny object is just it just oftentimes is the transactions easy, or I think a lot of people don't realize, and I don't, people that listen to the podcast know that I'm a huge fan of all media, but it's no surprise why Amazon is growing so well. But then it's difficult for CPG brands. It's difficult for B2B brands because and B2C more importantly is because you have to pay to play, but that's not the only place. And, I have this phrase, the anti-algorithm, like out of home. And I know you're a huge proponent of out of home, and we'll go deeper into that. But I loved the prep call we had because it's true, right? You could easily buy, Roundel, Walmart Connect, Amazon, and you could be good, but you're still missing the majority of the consumers that are just going about their everyday lives that maybe aren't in your algorithm and don't fit your feed. And, like Michael Jordan always famously said politically, he was like, well, Republicans buy sneakers too. And I like to steal and say, like, hey, dads also shop for toothpaste too. So
you're right.
where are
Yeah.
you going to talk
Yeah.
to that?
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm a big believer in, Byron Sharp's, book, How Brands Grow. It's one of my, like, tomes. People are tired of me probably talking about it, but the whole idea, and he has 2 books. I'm actually reading a second one that dives a bit into B2B stuff, but the idea that Pareto's law, that 20% of your customers are responsible for 80% of your sales, it's not true. And it's never true. It's usually more like 50-50. And so you're leaving a lot of these lighter buyers on the table when you're only reaching your heavy buyers, and you're really not able to get your heavy buyers to spend that much more. So there's a lot of things that have gone into this that sounded like, oh yeah, that makes sense, that now you're like, no, it's not actually working. And there's a lot of science behind it, and the idea that when you're only going after performance, that's like 5% of the people who are in market for your product, and you're leaving out all of the other people that will be soon. And like, what are category entry points, and how are you getting them before that so that when they enter the category, you're the first brand they think of? So we think a lot about those things because those have gotten forgotten in performance. And to your point, like, performance marketing is important, and we are big believers. And I always try to say, like, it's not that I hate performance marketing. It's just at this point in time, it's table stakes. You have to be there. I don't know if you've been on Instagram recently, but if you go on Instagram, every product is sponsored now, you know? So like, you have to be there or else you will get lost in the shuffle. But that's not going to grow your brand long term. What's going to grow your brand long term is people searching for your name specifically, right? And that's where we want to get for with our brands, is that like, they're not it's going to lower their performance costs long term if they invest in some of these broader awareness strategies, and it's proven. So,
Well, yeah, and how interesting, right? Throwing it back to The Simpsons, where literally not even a product, but the brand itself, Duff Beer, the way that the
yeah,
bottle's shaped and then the color. like you intuitively knew because I always go back to this. It's like we as humans are very curious. We're very creative people, whether we can actually paint, draw, act, do all those things, but we're very curious humans and we love creative. And if you put a logo in front of us enough times, you have to talk to us at different points. And how funny, the longest running, cartoon, a brand that's never been sold ever outside of like,
Right.
theme
Yeah.
parks. And you recognize that. So there's a lot of truth to that. And then obviously you can have the metrics of Duff beer. I feel like you should bring Duff beer to reality and like
We should. I
market
think that would be great. I mean, Rogue Beer just went under. Maybe we'll buy their,
by them
maybe
again.
buy their brands and relabel it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know, such a hard year right now for beer brands in general, but yeah, I mean, to your point, like, these things, there's a concept called creative compounding, where the more you're putting your brand in front of people, it compounds over time. That's why Coca-Cola is like a name brand and everything, but even Coca-Cola is still advertising because they know that memories diminish over time and you have to be continuous, and that stuff, the more you're continuous with your media, the better it is over time. You can be more efficient with that spend. You're not going to have to pour buckets of money over and over, but you still should be continuous. It's not a dip in, dip out thing. And that's always proven out. TV is actually a really great one for even these pretend brands, is because they're in front of you on a weekly basis. You remember these brands, even if they're fictional brands. So yeah, it's amazing to me. Um, it's amazing to me that more brands haven't picked up on that sort of concept of like, this is why things get sticky in your brain. And really, I always kind of, it feels like I'm crapping on Meta, but like Meta's come in and had these really low CPMs and everyone gets excited and it's efficient and stuff. But the issue is the advertising that occurs on Meta is very transactional, and
Yes.
it's much more about the offer than it is the brand. And so I can't count how many things I've bought on Meta that I don't remember the name of the brand because I bought based on the offer. And that's what's happened, is that like advertising has become so transactional in a lot of these spaces that the creative has gotten lost, and brands aren't actually building any equity with even with their own customers.
Yeah, and that
So,
brand loyalty is lost because it was never established. What
right.
what's your take on, in real life cultural relevance and brands coupling themselves with that? Because obviously beyond transactional, beyond, first click and points of purchase, what are your takes on that? On how brands are actually showing up? Because look, it's the experience on a screen is great, but it's how do you show up in my journey as a mom who's trying to hustle from the soccer field to pick up, your daughter at ballerina. And it's like, I just need to find a fast food place that can feed my kids quick. Like how is consumers and brands showing up together in real life important and cultural
Yeah,
moments?
I mean, one of the things that happens when it comes to like brand salience is like the way that our minds work in terms of like making quick things is like we're going to go with what's familiar. And so like I just had an example the other day. We needed to go get our tires checked because we were on a road trip, and there was like five tire shops near where we were. We were up in Seattle for a Huskies game, and and I was like, oh my gosh, we got to get this fixed. We can't get home. And I went with what was familiar. I went Discount Tire because I know I've seen them. They've been around. They're physically available in a lot of places, so you can see them. And it's always like you whittle down your choices automatically to these few, and then you're going to pick the one that's the most comfortable. And so, same thing with fast food. Like, there's a lot of options near us, and of course, I end up half the time going with what my daughter wants, which is not my favorite. She loves McDonald's, and I'm not a huge fan. But a lot of times the choices, I have like four choices in my head. And even though there might be a dozen restaurants, I'm going to whittle down. That's because our brain can't hold on to every option, right? So you're going to go with what's more familiar. And a lot of that is from advertising, even if people don't want to admit that
Yes.
they are impacted by advertising. There's a lot of studies around, target and holdout studies where people said, no, I didn't pick that because I saw the ad, but the targeted group versus the non-targeted was like five times more likely to pick a brand that they were exposed to, and they don't even know it's happening. And that's one of those things that just in the background through consistency is that like you're going to be one of those more automatic choices.
Yeah. And
So
it's also social plays a massive role beyond the advertising thing, so the influencer economy, that
Yeah.
side of it. I love that. How old are your kids?
She's 10. Well,
10.
almost 10. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have
Bad mom.
no worries. I had 13-year-old triplets and then an 11-year-old, and they're not big in social, but mom is, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of influencers that she follows, and that, she says the same thing like, "Oh, well, I make my own decisions." And I'm like, "Well, because you're told stories all day from people that you trust,
Mhm.
virtual, which is an odd world to me, but brands coupling themselves with influencers, that's become influencer economy used to be its off side over here with out of home, but now
Yeah.
it's starting to become a part of the full funnel approach. What are your takes on that?
Yeah, there was a new study, and I think it was from, maybe System One out of London, but it was talking about how to best use influencers, and they did a big study, about, influencer marketing and whether or not it's effective, and if you woulda asked me 2 months ago, I would have been like, "No," in terms of, like, building a brand long term, it's not effective, but they actually proved that if it's done the right way, it actually is effective, but you have to very much control the narrative that the influencers are using so that your brand identity is first and foremost in those instances in order for it to build long-term brand equity. And so it's a lot more about like, don't just let influencers go rogue and give them like, here's a product, do a review. A lot of times that stuff's not effective. And there's a lot of brands that are, spending a lot of money for, a very low return because they're not using them the right way. And when you are using them the right way, it's going to support all of your other marketing efforts, right? So it's omni-channel and it's part of the approach, but it's got to be more controlled around the brand and the brand manager. And I sort of read this and I was like, well, you're basically at that point kind of using them like a spokesperson, right? Like you are kind of giving them more of a script, but allowing them a little latitude. And I think that you will see that some influencers are not going to be able to pull that off. They're able to do the riffing and not able to do the rest of it well. But the ones that do that well and are able to actually commit to, helping a brand build its identity are going to emerge with a lot more money in their pockets. So, yeah, it's funny. I always love being challenged on my own notions because I have strong feelings about social media in general, and its its place in the world and stuff. And I actually don't let my kid on social, even though she gets exposed to it anyway. It's just one of those things. But it is effective, and I was challenged on that notion just by reading that study and going, okay, I'm going to have to revisit my thoughts on how this works and really say this can be effective if done right.
Yeah, and I think that's the key if done right. And to your previous point, it's the combination of media, right? It can't all be. I'm not allowed to say the brand or the conference that we were at. Well, I can say the conference. We were at a media post event, and it was like an off the record conversation, and a
Yeah,
very massive new brand that's been around for like 3 years or so, a beverage brand, and they were very savvy. I know who I'm talking about, but
I
it
do. I
it
do.
blew my
Yeah.
mind because the CMO flat out said, he was like, "I have to spend 50% of my revenue, my budget, advertising budget going towards retail media because I have no other choice. If I wanna end up in the aisle where it needs to be and where it needs to have." And he's like, "Whether I believe in it or not, I have to pay to play." He said, "But what I do, kind of to your point, is I combat that by also buying out of home, by also finding influencers and finding combinations of all media." Because again, we as consumers have become extremely complex, and I'd love to get your thoughts to where you can sniff out an influencer pretty quickly. You can also sniff out a brand that's trying to play to a cultural moment. I'll pick on Taylor Swift because I'm probably the one person on the universe that's not a fan of hers. But during Taylor Swift's launch album the other day, one of my employees, shout out to Alex, is going to absolutely kill me for saying that because she's like, "How dare you?" But if you recall, last month when our album dropped, it was every single brand to like nauseum, and it's like,
Yeah.
okay, like you're just trying to jump on a cultural moment, and my point is we as consumers, we're very complex and we're very smart now. And we can sniff out a fraud and we can also sniff out a brand that it's like, all right, you're just trying to get clout where you don't fit in this space. Like,
Yeah.
yes, brands do. Starbucks, they have the certain drinks you order, they play the music, like that fits. But then you have
Yeah.
other brands that you're just like, all right, you're reaching, like reaching.
Yeah.
So
Trying
thoughts
way
on
too
that?
hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right, and you have to gauge whether that cultural moment is gonna really contribute to your longer term identity or not. I mean, a lot of times it might get you some viral stuff. I think Wendy's does it really well, but
Oh,
that's
yeah.
honestly
Yes.
part of their bigger brand is leaning into the snark. So like they've doubled down on that and they will participate in those cultural moments and you kind of expect them to. But some brands jump in and you're like, what are you doing here? And why are you spending time on this? And you really have to look at it. And there's been so many instances in which brands get kudos for jumping on those moments, but when you go back in the back end and look at what they actually got from it, it wasn't much. It was a blip, and it didn't last. So I think that you have to look at the longer term. Is this actually going to deliver net new customers to my brand, or am I just trying too hard? To your point. And yeah, authenticity, I know it kind of gets overused in the advertising world, particularly with influencers, but people are pretty savvy to that. Um, but the other thing, and we haven't talked about it yet, but AI and advertising, again, one thing people say, and then another thing when they do, like people said they didn't want AI in advertising, but then everyone really liked the new Coke ad, and it tested really well. So sometimes those things that people say, oh no, I wouldn't do that, they actually do. I always talk about that, like kind of the mushiness index in marketing in general. When you do marketing research and talk to people about what their preferences are, take some of that with a grain of salt because people want to see the best versions of themselves, and the best versions of themselves wouldn't be swayed by advertising. So you have to look at the other data around the impact of advertising, which for us a lot of times is that third party sales data. Did it actually drive sales? At the end of the day, that's what matters.
Yeah.
Um,
What,
so
that just a side riff on AI, and we don't want it, but we do. Have you seen the 50 Cent, the rapper, in the song "What Up Gangster"? But
no,
it is so brilliant. So
I'll have to
brilliant.
check it out.
It's a 1950s soul version, but
Well,
but it's on YouTube, and it is,
okay.
like, mind-blowing. But so to that point, obviously 50 Cent didn't grow up in the '50s. He did grow up not too far out of my universe and my time. But how odd is it now that we as consumers, and it's funny watching my kids mostly because we're adults, we've seen a lot in the world. We're like, that's AI. But
Yeah.
now it's almost become like a phrase and a verb. Like it's like, oh, that's AI. Or is that AI?
Yeah.
Watching
Yeah.
my kids see things in that lens
Mhm.
is really weird. And so I would love to better understand, and you as an agency and been in the TV space forever, like how complex does that become where there's like you have to tell us if it's AI or if a brand's using it for fun, like Star Wars did that whole movie in AI,
Yeah.
5 minutes. But then there's brands out there that are trying to get a little savvy and trick people into things. Like what responsibility does the ad agency and the ad world have in AI as it relates to creative?
That's a really good question, and because we don't actually produce the creative, so we haven't grappled with it the same way, but I will tell you, like, I have seen it used really responsibly by agencies, where it wasn't either the entire spot, it was used for establishing shots that they couldn't have done on their own because of the budget or whatever, but I think I have deep concerns about truth in advertising myself. And when I see AI even used to change the outfits on people to show you a product, and I'm like, but that's not reality. I want to see it on a real person, or, like I want to see what it looks like in the wild, right? It sort of begs that question. And, I mean, look, McDonald's, Burger King, they've all been doing it for years. You know that flame broiled burger you're getting looks nothing like the ad, right? Like they just showed you the best version. So there's some of that that's already existed as a problem. But this is only going to make it worse. And we're all susceptible to it. I don't know if you saw the bunnies on the trampoline video, but I for sure thought that was real at first. And I was like, oh my gosh, oh, it's these bunnies that are like all jumping on a trampoline together. Like,
Oh, wait,
and
yes, yes.
it's wild, and I was for sure fooled by it, and so even getting back to my days as, pseudo journalism adjacent, there's so many problems with AI from that, perspective of how do we sort the truth out. I noticed the other day I was posting something on LinkedIn using an image that I created in ChatGPT, and LinkedIn actually, made a notation that this image was made in
Nice.
AI.
Okay.
And I was like, "Good for you."
Yeah.
Like, it didn't matter. I still posted it because it was one of those dumb, like, placeholder images to help support what I was saying, but I was like, good for you. I want more of that,
Yep.
just so I know in the background. And I don't think you're going to see that happen enough when it comes to video advertising because no one's going to want a bunch of disclaimers at the bottom of their ad that says this is AI. So it's still so much the wild, wild west.
For sure.
Um, but you've seen brands, get in trouble getting caught using AI and using it in lieu of creative people and using it to move too fast with their advertising and hurting themselves in the long run because that person that had six fingers and they didn't catch it or there was a misspelling or whatever and granted it's the worst it's ever going to be today. So it's gonna be fascinating, and we're watching it closely. And as someone who works closely with brands, we don't currently have any brands using AI for their advertising. I'm certain that there's agencies using it to iterate their creative for sizing differences and some of those small things. But I mean, it's touching every corner of where we live right now.
Yeah. What
I don't know about you, but I use it every day.
Yeah, we use it every day here. I sit on the committee, the executive committee with our CEO talking about AI, and we're very much in the infancy, and ours obviously being publicly traded is very much around like privacy and data and better understanding like how do we build out a walled garden where it's just Lamar's content and data. So being very responsible and more using it less on I don't want to say we're not dabbling in it yet on the creative side, but there is a lot of efficiency. So kind of
Mhm.
switching gears here, you have a very powerful agency, and correct me if I'm wrong, but 9 employees that have
Mhm.
been with you from the beginning. You're able to kind of punch above your weight because of how, passionate. I love your passion, by the way, which is why I love to
Thanks.
have you on. And
Thanks.
side note for our listeners, go follow her on LinkedIn. It is like everything's a video, which I appreciate because I rather watch than read, but that's your journalism days. But where are you using your efficiency side of the agency, being a air quote boutique, but are
Yeah.
you using AI from an efficiency standpoint and being able to keep costs low and a smaller agency, but be able to be more powerful with AI?
Yes, we're using it across the board. I just onboarded a new program called Marbleism that another agency person told me about that has agents that help me even with like content creation. I don't use it for video editing. I actually have someone who I hire to help with that because he does a tremendous job. But I use it for that. We use it for qualifying RFPs that might come across our desk. We have like a qualifier chat GPT that we just built to help us go through quickly and vet things because, RFPs are all over the place. There's no consistency to what they ask, and it's such a nightmare sometimes. So we have that. Even our reporting, we now have an automated way of pulling our reporting out and pulling out insights from large data sets to tell us something that's more actionable for our clients. So it's helping us with some of these back end things. It hasn't yet. I will say, obviously, AI is built into almost every digital platform that we work on from a background of optimizing media in flight. But we haven't gone in and had it replace any media buyers. Like we're still going in and doing all of the campaign setups and still getting very much under the hood to look at inventory quality because I'm a paid skeptic about everything, and I don't believe that anything will be handled right unless we are eyeballs on it. But we definitely use it in the background to help remove some layers of administrative work for our team. And we talk about it a lot because I'm a big believer in keeping our team employed and I love our team and I want us to only grow from here. And so we want that to not minimize we don't want it to replace humans down the road. We know that it will replace some of the work that gets done by the humans, but it's still going to be that same team managing it. And it's not going to replace like some of the strategic insights. Cause I've even used some of these beta tools that will say, we'll come in and we'll do your media for you and we'll resize all your creative and put it on all these 10
Yep.
platforms. And
Yep.
I'm like, I can tell you it's not doing a good job. There's so much more nuance to it. And I see a lot of these brands that are really excited and touting that they don't need a media agency because they have these AI tools. And I'm like, well, you're going to get surpassed by another brand that's more savvy about where they're putting their media dollars and paying attention to things like contextual quality. Because I
Correct.
guarantee you're not getting contextual quality with where you're running when AI is involved because AI doesn't care about that.
Yeah, and we've met with a lot of those companies, and it's one thing for basic online banner ads and takeover, not even takeovers. They don't do that well. But I think you said it best is like contextually relevance is something that's massive in the out of home space. And for us, it's like you have to understand geography around you, what's the consumer's mindset at that moment in time, and it's not a one-to-one experience, so you're talking to so many other people. So what I this is where I want you to get excited about out of home, and we
Yeah,
typically don't do this on the podcast, but you are such a huge proponent of out of home, and I want you to kind of share with our listeners, and this is not me, you know, asking Lauren to like, hey, plug Lamar. It's just really when we first met, I think you out of home played a massive role in your initial client strategy for your agency when you first developed it, if I'm not remembering.
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and we work across, I don't know how many different TV markets we worked across because we had at one point 30 plus TV stations that we were working with. And every out of home market's so very, very different. Um, and so we have some markets that just have tremendous out of home and we could go by and get, some of the, digital networks where you get that broad reach. But we've even had tremendous success with more traditional out of home and doing cool things like extensions, weather triggered out of home for some of the news stations that we've done. So there's just really cool capabilities you can do with out of home between the two. And I'm a big believer in both for different reasons. And so like we just love working with out of home and really getting creative with it. And one of the things I love about out of home that I don't think happens enough is bringing in your media agency early enough that it's part of the ideation of how you can do your creative because there's so many opportunities. Getting back to like AI can't tell you that you have sequential boards on this highway and that you might be able to do this really cool thing. You have to talk to the rep and figure out when are those available for us to make that opportunity happen and how could we do, extensions. You have to work with the city sometimes on certain activations. So there's just so many things you can do with it. And I'm a big believer in the impact of it, particularly because you are, nowadays, especially people are back on the road more, you're driving by these boards consistently. And we talk about creative compounding. You're seeing those messages over and over and over. Um, that's one of the powerful things, and you know that people are going to be seeing it. Where sometimes when you go into the digital, you're trusting the digital ecosystem, the reach and frequency and unique reach reports that you get back, but you don't know dwell time on the ads. There's a lot of information you don't have. Whereas when you're, looking at your out of home board, you can drive by it and see it, and you can see the impact of it and how it looks down the road, up close, all of those things. So we're just big believers in it for a lot of different varieties, and we even use it for B2B. Yeah, it's a fantastic and powerful, tool, and there is so many different types, of course, too. So we talk a lot about the different types of out of home and the different ways to buy it to be most effective. So
Yeah.
yeah.
What kind of and again, I that's what I love about it because I early on your friend that was on the podcast before, she was like, she loves out of home. And I was like, everybody loves out of home. And then I dove deeper into yours. And I think it's because of what you're talking about. We talk about it all the time. It's a blank canvas. And it's different than like the scroll experience, right? Where it's like, all right, I know what I'm on. I know my mindset. And again, it has a place and a moment, but that delight surprise that out of home provides is just unbelievable. The thing that we're and I would want your take on this, but the thing that now we're starting to see is a lot of CPG brands because we are programmatically enabled. Now the brands can start to buy CPG brands can buy because they're like, okay, I want to buy around Target, around Walmart, out of home screens. And then I know that I have in app, I have in store, and I have online covered all through my, retail media network, if I'm
Mm.
Roundel as an example. And now out of home can be that extension and reach. And to your point, it's so much different when you have a massive roadside billboard or a bus shelter or a transit ad where you don't have to buy very many billboards to kind of take over a market. It's like, wow, Campbell's Soups looks like they're everywhere. And it's like,
Right.
they just bought 6 boards in a market. So
Yeah.
kind of if you can kind of give a little bit more color on your thoughts on that, like why retail media network and out of home really play well together and where that evolution is headed in your mind and in your
Oh,
expertise.
yeah. I mean, I think you're going to start to see more technology around trying to provide better attribution. I think it was Albertsons. One of them is doing a beta. I think it might be with Trade Desk or I'm going to misspeak. But anyways, they're doing a beta on trying to do attribution for programmatic out of home, and tying it back to sales. It's ultimately what we're already doing with our clients through third party. It's just that it's not down to channel level. But to your point, like we've gotten really clever with out of home to make it be really efficient in terms of like we've even had times where we've bought like 3 periods on one board and moved the vinyl to another. So we saved on the printing costs because some of our clients are small and scrappy, right? So you get that broad reach, you get that 100% Sarah voice on vinyl, which I really love. But to your point, even like on programmatic, we still for the most part go direct to our vendors to buy versus programmatic because it's more affordable for our clients and we have better control over the location selection. And I love my pop images, which a lot of times they're just modeled for programmatic. So there's a lot of reasons why we do programmatic on occasion as well. It just has to fit the right need. But that broad reach, there's very little places nowadays, especially with the fragmentation on cable and broadcast. There's very little places that you can get such broad reach, and be really consistent and be contextually high quality because there's no fraud. And that's not talked about enough. It's not like you're going to drive by a billboard and you're like, that's not real, or this person's not a real car that drove by. You know what I mean? Like there's just not that same issue that you have with other places. So like there's so many reasons that we just love it for that quality. And from my perspective too, like I love non-standard out of home sizes as well. Like wallscapes, huge fan of wallscapes, huge fan of using those as part of the mix and along with some more standard sizes. So for me, that's the stuff that's sticky when it comes to marketing. Whereas like I get bombarded in social and I know I say I don't like it, but I'm on there too. I get bombarded with ads in there that I don't remember, but I remember the billboard down the street for the new fitness club that's going in. So from my perspective, we talked a lot about not just reach and frequency, but effective reach and frequency. And for me, effective reach and frequency is about attention and high attention spaces. And I put out a home up in a high attention space along with like connected TV, where some of these other ones like display is low attention, social somewhere in the middle, depending on the creative quality. And so like we really, really like that for that, adding to that frequency, but knowing it's more effective frequency.
Yeah. One of the phrases you use quite a few times is like mental availability. And I'm going to steal that from you because it's interesting, right? Because our mindset, and again, not to like praise out of home, but it's like it's the only medium where you don't have to like pay a tax to continue watching Yellowstone, to, you know, scroll
Yeah.
to the next feed. And it's that mental availability, again, going back to the savvy consumer, it's like, all right, I know when I'm on Instagram and you're like serving me an ad, you're like, I see you, Lululemon. I went into, Athleta with my wife, and now you're trying to serve me something because it's Christmas time. Like, well done. And maybe
Yeah.
that's just us because we're in the ad space. I always jokingly say, like, I wish I could experience advertising not knowing all of these amazing tricks that are so
Yeah.
effective on why you're serving, relevant ads at the right place, right time. And like, wow, why does that digital board, display that creative when it's snowing outside? Like how intuitive, but how,
Yeah.
how has that complexity like evolved in your career from the early days from TV to where you are today? And how has that made you a better, agency owner and a better, storyteller for the clients and the brands that you win?
Well, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I do think that I bring my marketing director hat to what we do every day as a media buyer, and I think, and I'm not the only one on our team that was a marketing director. Our marketing director, and also she was our account director. Maya was also a marketing director, and we both have bought out of home and executed campaigns that used RSS feeds to provide like news headlines, and like this was like over 10 years ago when this technology was relatively new, but being able to like not just be the buyer, but be the person who was executing creative campaigns back in the day has really helped us understand how to think creatively, not just about the channel, but the capabilities within the channel to make your creative more effective. So even though we're not the ones creating the creative materials, we often work in partnership with creative agencies or in-house teams. We can come in as like an advisor and say, but have you thought about a countdown clock, dynamically inserted? And it's not just, programmatic at home, but you can also do it here and here. And then it's all cohesive, and really making sure that that creative is singing in a way that, if just a static ad, static programmatic, it was fine, but this is going to make it one more step memorable. So I think having that experience and coming in and thinking about it has helped us be better media buyers about where we are going to put our clients, and really helping them think strategically, not just about like what is the message, but how can we make that message be sold better using the technology that's now available to us. There's so much discussion about the data that's available, and I don't think we talk enough about the capabilities of like the techno side of like we can do weather triggered creative, and it's not just for a news station. If you're a hot chocolate company, you know, put together a plan that's promoting it when it's dipping below 30 degrees, there's so many cool things you can do, and it's fun to think about too.
Yeah. Well, and then just disrupting the consumer. I keep using the phrase the anti-algorithm. That's my 2026 like talking point is
Love
like,
it. Yeah.
how do we become that anti-algorithm? Because there's so many brands, challenger brands that are out there and they're like, all right, well, I guess I just have to compete online and just spend more. And it's like, God, there's so many unique little things. And that's what I love about agencies like yourself, because you can be, quick, scrappy, but more importantly, be more knowledgeable about, it's almost like you're a modern day chemist, putting the right methodology of screens and consumers because I love automation. People call it programmatic. I love automation side of things, but I think it's made a lot of media buyers kind of lazy in
Oh,
this
yeah.
sense where it's like, look, it's just easy. Like this drinkable brand that I was talking about earlier, I just put 50% of my budget into there. I know half of it's not going to work, whatever. And then I'll buy this and then I'll buy that. And it's all done through platforms. But give our listeners a little bit more as we kind of get to the end here on what differentiates your agency from others. And I kind of led you towards that, but I think that just like you have challenger brands that are disrupting by being in different unique media, like out of home, like hand painted walls, agencies like yours are leaning deep into technology, but they're also very, very savvy on like how to truly kind of put these plans together in a non-automated way.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. No, that was a really good teeing it up. I think, one of the things that we've talked about is that you can't, throw a rock out your window without hitting a digital marketing agency. They're everywhere, right? And e-com, and it's not that e-com's easy, not, it's not easy. But there's so many agencies out there that can do that and do it well. Where we really feel like we fit is that we're not just that. We are coming in with traditional in the mix and really understanding how to bridge the two and understanding that like all of these brands are seeing this performance plateau because they leaned into performance when it was having its heyday. Now everyone's there. It's diminishing returns and it's only going to get worse. And so the brands that are going to succeed in the next 10 years are going to be the ones that are actually pivoting back to more of an omni-channel strategy that leans into traditional.
Mhm.
And we are helping the brands that are ready to lean into that. And I was at a media post conference. It was like a year ago. I don't know if you were at the CPG one, but it was the one a year ago. And they were already talking about, hey, our agencies are giving us back these reports on ROAS that don't match reality. And we're not seeing it on the balance sheet. Our CFO is pissed, and I was like, well, that's because it's not reality. It's not incrementality. You're not seeing that because you're going after the same like small subset of customers and expecting you're going to squeeze more out of that. And that's just not how growth works. And so really coming in and working with our brands and the brands that are going to be successful in the future are going to have to take the risk of going back to the old school of like, we're going to put money into these things that we know is going to work, but it's going to take 12 to 16 weeks to see that show up. And that's the investment. We're not going to get a nice dashboard that's going to show us tomorrow a ROAS number because they've now proven like that looked nice, but didn't really work. And so, and to your point, like, yes, performance is not going away. It's going to still exist. It's table stakes. I had someone at a conference I was just at refer to it as like a defensive tactic when it comes to marketing, where you're just there for defense. but a lot of your budget needs to be set aside against things that are offensive. And most brands are still just sitting in defensive. And they're like, but our ROAS is good. And I'm like, but they're like, but it's going down. And why? And I'm like, because it's not going to get better. You have to bring in a broad awareness layer to the mix to see to see that performance come back down because no one knows who you are. So we are starting to see more brands lean into their KPIs not being ROAS, but being either brand awareness that they're tracking through something like Tracksuit, or they're using kind of the methodology that we're using of target holdout. Let's see what the campaign does compared to comp markets, and there's a lot of there's a lot of science and math that goes into that stuff that we work with our partner on because they're really good at it. But that's where we are seeing like the future, and that's what differentiates us. We're not going to come in and promise you a dashboard that's a bunch of BS. So,
Yeah, that's the tricky part, right? Because everybody loves that dashboard, and I think that's been our biggest challenge here at Lamar and just the industry as a whole. It's like, okay, how do we look, act, and behave like digital? I'm like, we don't. Like, yes, it's important for us to expose our inventory to be purchased programmatically or digital, but like there is a place for, and I'm gonna give you a shout out for your last LinkedIn post. Like there is a place for like, hey, I need a high impact. I'm Percy Jackson, and I want a billboard that literally turns into a waterfall. Like, you're not going to
yeah.
find that on an automated platform. You're going to
Mm-mm.
find that in a scrappy room where you're like, and maybe the automated part is, hey, I can go onto lamar.com and I can narrow down the inventory in Portland, Oregon, and I can go all the way down. But then I'm going to have a conversation with that out of home rep. And then we're going to collaborate. And then I'm going to bring the creative agency in and we're going to do something cool. That doesn't happen through tech. And also that's not going to have the ROAS effect of like, well, how many movie tickets did that Percy Jackson?
100%.
It's like
Yeah,
it's
that's
beyond that. We're
yeah.
storytelling now.
Yeah, 100%. That's it. And you look at those things, and I'm always saying the same thing with experiential. You're not going to tease out the math on this and say this was a better bet than like your whatever, whatever. But like people are going to remember it, and it's going to be hard to quantify that. But that's one of those things in terms of like, fortune favors the brave. It does favor the brave in marketing, and that's brave marketing because you're going in knowing it's not going to show up on a dashboard, and you're still going to justify it and say this is going to move the needle. So.
I'm gonna cue this up so that you can have a moment to give your favorite out of home campaign because I know you're such a huge fan of it. But I'll cue it up as it relates to exactly what we're talking about, like performance based. It's huge. It's important. Out of home, you can measure some components of it. You know, there is this social media impact. So I'll give mine while you think about yours. But a good friend of mine, shout out to Kelly Puckett and Stephen Lease, the CMO and the co-founder of Gooder Sunglasses, and the short of this story is, and you can look this up on Lamar's YouTube channel, but their mascot is the flamingo, Carl. And Kelly came to me and her and I worked together for years. And she said, Ian, we need to find a Carl, Georgia. And I'm like, we actually have Carl, Georgia, and we have billboards in Carl, Georgia. It's an actual city. So here's a city outside of Athens, Georgia. They literally bought 11 posters, which for our digital listeners, those are the small screens that are on surface streets. If you added up all the weekly impressions of this billboard, the 11 boards maybe hit 200,000 for the week. The population of Carl, Georgia was 197 people. And instead of going in, and obviously their CFO is like, the ROI on this doesn't make sense, but they're like, I don't care about that. So they put up a billboard and they said, hey, Carl, meet Carl. And it was a picture of Carl the flamingo. They flew
Yeah.
their experiential team in. They had sunglasses for every single resident of Carl. They showed their driver's license. They gave him a free pair of sunglasses. They
Love
ended
it.
up interacting with the mayor of Carl, Georgia. He bought into it. It went viral on TikTok, and you can't measure that and you can't buy that programmatically. And it was literally like the coolest campaign that I've ever been a part of. And there's hundreds of them that I've been a part of. But it was super cool because from a revenue perspective and an ROI and a ROAS and all the other, acronyms, it didn't check any of those boxes, but what
Right.
it did check was like the cool, relevant
Yeah.
factor that went viral.
And so on brand for that brand
Yep.
too, like so on brand for them. That's amazing. I love it.
All
Oh,
right. How
so
about you?
for let's see, my favorite, I'm going to go way, way back in time.
Love it.
And I don't know if you know the history of Wall Drug. Um, but Wall Drug in the middle of I don't even know where in South Dakota it is. It's sort of near Rapid City. But it's off the beaten path. Um, long time ago, Wall Drug, they built a highway, and Wall Drug used to be on the path to get, through to where you needed to go. But then the highway came in, and suddenly they didn't have customers anymore, and they didn't know what they were going to do. So they decided they were going to be a pit stop for ice water because it's kind of nowhere near anything. And they put up out of home signs, and some of them were hundreds of miles away because this is people who were making a trek across the country. And they saved, not only did they save their business, I mean, they are now kind of a household name. It's kitschy, I don't know if you've been there, but it's kind of a wild little place. But that's what saved that company, was out of home, and telling people you can stop here. And it was for one little thing, ice water, which back in the day was, something that wasn't easy to find. They had ice water, coffee, I think donuts, and people got off the beaten path and went and bought that. And so it saved that brand. And I will tell you, even when we were on our road trip, we made a point to go to Wall Drug, and there was the signs when we
Nice.
were kind of on our road trip to go out there. And so like for me, like that's one of the examples of like the tremendous power of out of home to save a brand. It's an old one, and I
No, I
don't
love
know
that.
how old it is, but
Yeah, I just looked it up. The company was founded in 1931, and this billboard was 394 miles away from Wall Drug, which now you may not know this because where you are geographically, but Bucky's is like this.
yes,
Yeah. So
love
Bucky's will,
Bucky's.
yeah. So Bucky's will buy billboards and say, again, culturally relevant, funny, but they'll say like, you can hold it, Bucky's, 298 miles away. And you're just like, wait, this is,
Yeah,
so now
yeah.
you're gonna playfully talk to me. Yeah, I love
But they're like an icon, like they're a Texas icon, and they're expanding too. I
Mhm.
mean, for
Oh, it's
sure, they've
massive.
definitely leaned into out of home. I mean, just the point. I mean, I've bought socks at Bucky's before for gifts. I mean, like they're just great. It's such a fun brand.
Yeah,
So
it really is.
yeah, yeah,
Well, look, this has been a blast, but before we let you go, because we just glazed over the fact that you have 3 Emmys. So
yeah,
you're just like nonchalant, like, "Oh, she has 3 Emmys." But oh, that's huge.
yeah.
So give our as we wrap here, give our listeners what the Emmys were from. Obviously, it was your days working in TV, but give us a little bit more detail.
Yeah, so these are regional Emmys from, the Denver area, which covers actually, I think, like, Oklahoma and some other stuff, but when I worked out at the CBS station in Denver, they were for some creative campaigns that we did, just promoting the news station. What's funny is that I have another award that's next to them that's actually a national award. It's a bigger deal, but, like, no one knows that unless you work within the TV industry. It's a Promax award. But yeah, the Emmys are awesome. They're like fun little hood ornaments, and really proud of them. It's always a kick to get to talk about them and share because it was a fun experience. And you get to go to gala and accept the award. It's not the national one, but it's still like it's really a lot of fun experience. And it's most people don't get awards for their work,
No,
so
not at
this
all.
is a pretty cool thing to get to have happen. So
Yeah, and it
yeah,
obviously sparked you to be where you are today. And look, I'm beyond excited to be able to share your passion with our listeners. And look, if you're a brand and you need a scrappy boutique agency, you know, give a shout out here.
let's go.
But yeah, I love a great follow, and definitely last time we talked, I actually already ordered that billboard, or I'm sorry, not billboard, the book, How Brands
Oh,
Grow.
Bran Scrope, yes, big fan of it. It's a heavy read. It's a lot there's a lot of but there's so many studies that have gone into that book that talk about like the science behind how our brains work when we go into that physical availability meets mental availability meets making the choice of your brand, and that's what we're all about. So
There's that word again, mental
yeah,
availability. I love it.
yeah,
Lauren,
yeah,
thank you so much for your
yeah,
time and appreciate everything that you do.
yeah. Thanks so much.
All right, take
Take
care.
care. Okay, bye.